So hi, I'm Fiona. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a lesbian engineering geologist living in the Midlands. I really enjoy what I do, but I think that not many people know what I do. And then I feel like lots of people in my career and industry sector don't have a lot of experience with being very inclusive or being very diverse. So I've kind of evolved within my role to try and make it my ambition to increase inclusivity in the engineering sector, but also bring a bit of what I do into the LGBTQ plus community. A bit of background about me. Sorry, my slide is not. There we go. Bit of background about me. So I'm also studying for a part-time MSc at Birmingham University in Geotechnical Engineering and Management. I'm doing that sort of part-time whilst also working for a small consultancy based in the Midlands. I've also worked for a larger company as a graduate, so I've had experience working both in a large company and also now for a small consultancy. I think both of those are really important in my sort of overview of how we can increase inclusivity and get sort of larger board members on board. Today I'm going to talk about my job role, what I do in work, and what I do sort of out of work, volunteering and trying to set up initiatives in the industry to try and ensure that the next sort of graduate generation coming through has a better working environment, but also people at school level at the moment can see it as a viable career opportunity with loads of visible role models from diverse backgrounds. Currently the company I work for is really gender diverse, but apart from that, there's not a lot of diversity. So I think that they don't see it as a necessity. They're like, oh, we hire 50% women, excellent, but do you hire any people of colour? There's no other diversity. So I think that while some companies think that they've achieved diversity by just having a few women, doesn't really equal that they have. So I think it's raising that awareness and making sure that everyone's inclusive, not just the big companies that have got a HR department. So firstly, I'm going to talk about what I do for a job. So as an engineering geologist, I'm site-based a lot. So I go around to different construction sites and take samples of the soil and bedrock to establish if it's suitable to construct on, and then inform the civil and structural engineers how they need to design their buildings to ensure that they have longevity. As I'm an engineering geologist, it means that I spend a lot of time on different construction sites, going around the country, and it can be quite an isolating role. You're often not with your colleagues, you're often on your own, or with just a couple of people, quite often subcontractors. I think this also elevates the need to ensure that there's a wider community within the engineering geology sector, so that we can communicate with each other. And this has become particularly heightened during lockdown, with not many of us being in the office, but also being out on site, not able to communicate very well with each other. And a couple of initiatives that have been set up during lockdown are hoping to increase this communications between other people in the field. I'm going to run through today a bit about the technical aspects of my job, what I do on a day-to-day basis and how it works, and then run through things I do outside of work and things I've been involved with volunteering, and then sort of my hopes and thoughts for the future. A few of the pictures you can see on the slides are of jobs that I've worked on in the last couple of years. The top smaller circle is a rotary rig. This cores bedrock. As you can see, the photo of the rock core, that's a limestone. And then there's the triangular looking rig with the wheels on. that's a cable rig that takes soil samples, which you'll see some of them later. And then the lower picture is of an earthworks project where we've dug the soil out the ground and we're placing it back to a greater compaction, so it's more competent to build the shed you can see going up in the background. So I'm going to run through a bit about what I do day to day, when we take on a project, how the process goes through from start to finish, because I think a lot of people hear engineering geology and don't really understand perhaps what that involves. They're like, engineer, yes, understand that. Geologist, yes, understand that. Perhaps don't see how the two merge, and a bit about why I find it so fascinating. It's a really varied job. So it starts with me picking up a project. So a client will come to us and say, I want to build this building and I want to build it there. And then we have to go back, we have to look through all the information that we might be able to find for that project. The maps that you can see on the screen are historic maps from 1800s through to almost the present day. So we look at all of these and we have like an archive, and we're able to see what was built there, how that might have influenced the ground, how it might have contaminated the ground through the Industrial Revolution and the current, up to the current day. Was there any factories built there? Was there likely to be any leather factories or anything that might have contaminated the ground that we need to make sure that the client's aware of? How is the groundwater? Can we protect that through what we're doing from any contaminants that might also be there? We then look at geological mapping. So we go through what have other people recorded in the past that might be under the ground. So do we know whether there are any superficial deposits? Do we know if a river has run over the site? Do we know what the bedrock's like? What equipment might be suitable to take the right sort of samples so that we can best evaluate the ground conditions? So then once we've collated all this sort of what we call desk study data, we then go on to site. Once we're on site, what we look to do is use sort of a mix of excavators, plants to dig out the ground to take bulk soil samples. We used to use drilling rigs to take samples of the soil. What you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is one of my logs of the soil. So it's quite detailed. We list every strata that we encounter and then we describe it to a British standard. So this is every sort of engineering geologist in the UK and then separately around the world has their own standard of how we have to describe the soil. So there's a set word order that has to happen. It starts with the consistency, then it goes to the colour, then it goes to what the constituents of the soil are. This is to ensure that no matter who logs that soil, it's always described in the same way so that the next person coming along can understand exactly how the soil is going to behave and what it might look like. We also take lots of samples of the soil so that we can then go back and do lots of laboratory testing. And we also quite often install boreholes into the ground to monitor the groundwater levels and also take groundwater samples to ensure that the groundwater is of a good quality and that we're not impacting the local groundwater boreholes where people get their drinking water. So as you can see, the log was nice and neat, but this is what we're faced with on site when we're getting the soil samples. So we have to take rather a messy and works environment and make sure that we are then able to transcribe that into a neat and detailed log so that people can design their foundations accurately. So I have to balance communicating with drillers and the workforce on site and then also engineers back in the office. I really think that coming from a diverse background helps me balance those two communication skills. So once we've been to site, we then return to our offices and our stores and we evaluate the samples that we've taken and then send them to different laboratories to get them tested. We can test them for a variety of things. The sample that you can see of soil is one that has been taken as a class 1 sample. This means that it's of the highest quality. We've used a method that ensures that not too much of the soil structure is disturbed, so that when we come to test it, it acts as it might have done in the ground, so that it's not too disturbed, and we're able to do quite high level testing on this. If it was, say, example, a rock test, then it would be extruded from the ground very much as it was in situ, and we basically just crushed them to see how strong the rock is. But other tests that we do involve looking at the particle sizes and how they interact and how much moisture is in the soil, and then that affects the strength of the soil itself. All these help to build a bigger picture of our logging descriptions and what the soil is going to behave like when you build a building on top of it. Is it going to be highly compressible? Does it have lots of organic material in that might make it degrade over time? Or have we found that when coring that the core bit has dropped suddenly, and it might have something like a chalk solution feature where groundwater has run under the ground and washed away the rock? Obviously this would then need to be sort of remediated prior to people building their buildings. And then we come on to the reporting. So interestingly, the reddish sample at the bottom is one that we actually took from the University of Birmingham car park. It's of a weathered sandstone, and they were sort of looking to put up a new building there. And I was able to be the person on site taking soil samples, so I thought I'd include it as you wander around campus, and you'll be able to see sort of what the rocks look like under your feet. So yeah, when we're looking at designing foundations, we need to know how stiff the ground is and how competent it is, and then we can design the different foundations suitably. So if we've got a really hard bedrock, we just put in a shallow foundation, and if it's a load of alluvium and really soft deposits, then we might be looking for sort of a piling rig. Again, like the ones that we've seen around Birmingham University campus being really noisy when we had our lectures last year. So going to talk now a bit about why I sort of got involved in engineering geology, and then where I've gone from that. So I really enjoy the outdoors, and I really find the ground beneath our feet really fascinating. I love the fact that I'm the first person to ever have touched these soils for millions of years since they were laid down. You can see loads of fossils and plant life, and it's sort of a really interesting way to follow geology through time. It also incorporates my other love, which is maths. So I get to do lots of modelling and analysis of the rock properties on computer programs following the results of the lab testing. So basically in my role, I started as a graduate just going out and taking soil samples. At the time when I started as a graduate, I wasn't actually out at work. I wasn't even out in my personal life either. So after meeting my girlfriend, I realised that I needed to come out at work, because I think that you can only be your true, authentic self when you're able to come out at work. But it was a very male environment, and I didn't really feel comfortable, and I didn't really have any visible role models that I was able to see were out and successful in my industry. So I decided to contact Into Engineering. They're a engineering LGBT support network, and offer lots of resources and, at the time, networking events. Able to speak to lots of people, and found that they had really positive experience of coming out in the workplace through engineering and construction. And I felt like I should be able to be out and also provide support as a visible role model for other people in my industry. because every engineer tends to go to different sites every week, we end up having to come out quite frequently. And I can't admit that I come out every time I go to a building site. And I definitely do judge the atmosphere and the people around me before I do so. But I do like to wear rainbow laces and a rainbow sticker on my hard hat. And I feel it's really important to have a visible representation within our industry. I also feel like if I'm running a site, which I do quite often these days, that it's important to have those conversations with people, because once you open up about yourself and your own concerns, they tend to open up about theirs. One issue that I'm really passionate about is mental health. And a staggering statistic is that a lot of male people in the construction environment struggle with their own mental health. And that if I'm able to be open about mine, then other people are able to feel that they can talk to me about theirs. So my work life is quite hectic. I'm all around the UK in different places, getting up at 4:30 in the morning to make it to Portsmouth, to Crunton to take a ground investigation, or running across the country to visit another site. It often means that I am in a hotel and working a lot of different hours. Trying to balance that with undertaking an MSc at Birmingham has, I admit, been quite tricky, but I kind of find myself encouraged because it's so relatable to what I do in my day job. I am quite disciplined and I do spend a lot of time studying when I have exams, but I really enjoyed the way that the MSc programme in Birmingham allowed me to break up my time. So it runs in week blocks rather than an in-out, say, a couple of days a week. So I'm able to dedicate, right, this month I've got 2 weeks of studying, and then I don't have another for 2 months, which is quite nice. Please feel free to ask me plenty of questions in the chat afterwards about this if you have any. One of the things I really struggled with at the moment is COVID getting in the way of my studies. I'd finished all my taught modules last year, but I haven't been able to undertake my final module, which was my final project, because I was due to be undertaking it during this year, and COVID has definitely got in the way. So I feel it's a real struggle to have that going on. So it's not been easy. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the differences between industry, academia, and perceptions. I think people view academia as somewhere that's forward thinking, and in a sense it is in terms of technology and uses. And I also think that industry in terms of construction gets a really bad rep in terms of being progressive, especially due to inclusivity. But I've actually found it's the other way around. A lot of people on site have been really open and really supportive of me being out in construction, and also pushing forward to improve mental health and raising awareness and diversity. I haven't almost always found the same in academia. Sometimes I feel like the lecturers are quite stuck in the past and also reflect their views on the industry as a whole, and I found that really disappointing. Hence that I joined part of the EDI committee in the university's engineering department. Other things that I've been up to this year have been really fortunate, really, because the lockdown has meant that I spend a lot less time commuting and can spend a lot more time putting energy and effort into increasing the diversity in our industry. So I've been part of Ground Forum, which is a panel body of industry associations for the geotechnical sector. We've been working on lots of projects. I think the really one that I'm most passionate about is the fact that we've set up a mentoring scheme for undergraduates of diverse backgrounds. I think there's 50% BAME, and there's 50% female and or non-binary, and also partly there's some representation from the LGBT community. We've been able to pair everyone up with a mentor, and they offer work experience, support and mentoring through their undergraduate, and then workplace opportunities going forward. So hopefully this will create a smoother career pathway, and also it promotes the visible role models within our community. I've also been involved in lots of podcasts, magazine articles, and other things during lockdown, which has been really good and something I've really enjoyed. But as you might be aware, I'm probably not the most socially eloquent person. So although it's a challenge and I'm pretty much a very strong introvert, I like to do these things because I felt that people weren't there for me when I was a graduate, and we should be supportive if we can, and we're in a privileged enough position to do so. A couple of minutes on keeping a work-life balance. I think it's super important to not only focus on your studies and your work, and you have to take time back for yourself. So yeah, get plenty of light in the daylight, which I think I struggle with at the moment. I spend far too much time not taking a lunch break, and sometimes site life gets in the way of hobbies and spending time with my cat and my girlfriend. But I think it's really important. We all need to ensure that we take enough time out to do so. For example, I booked today off work, so once I've done this, I have plenty of time to relax and have a nice long weekend. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully you've enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you so much for that talk. And we've got a few questions already, if you're happy to answer them.
Yeah,
and everyone else, feel free to drop any questions you have throughout the day in our Q&A box. So the first question I have is, do you think being a part-time student affects your experience as an LGBTQ student?
I think it does, because when I was an undergraduate, I wasn't, I think it's really important to discuss compulsory heterosexuality. So the fact that I didn't really acknowledge my sexuality in my undergrad, I kind of was just bumbling along, trying to function and cover everyone else's expectations. So I don't think I got the best out of my university experience. And I think having them come out and spending time at university and having that space to be an LGBT student, I think I have the confidence to push back when people don't make space for us, and I don't think I would have done that as an undergraduate. Perhaps that's my experience.
Thank you. Then next up is, do you have any thoughts on the unpaid labour, both physical and emotional, of being on EDI committees and being kind of the visible person, especially in engineering?
Yes.
I'm sure we all have lots of thoughts on this, but if you've got a summary.
I'd very much not like it to be unpaid, but I think, well, interestingly, I was having a discussion with one of my friends / colleagues on LinkedIn. He works for a larger engineering firm, and actually he's been given a job code for him to be able to spend time giving back to the EDI initiatives and community, which I think is awesome. Like, I was so impressed with their company, and it's such a good initiative and something that I would be like, oh, I'll definitely look for jobs for that company. And I don't understand why other people don't see the merit and necessity to not pay us for our time. But there we go. Hopefully this proves it's a step forward and there'll be less unpaid work, but I think it's too important, and if we're in privileged enough position to spend time doing it, then it's more merited than turning it down because it's unpaid.
Thank you. What key things can universities do to improve? I guess this is related to, you said that academia is a lot worse than industry, so what lessons, I guess, can academia learn from industry?
A couple of things that I would have said is providing opportunities and platforms for students to feedback, but then also providing evidence to those students that their feedback has been acted upon. I feel like sometimes a lot of students feed through a system to raise their concerns or experiences or suggestions, of which they have many valid ones, but then don't necessarily see a reaction from the university as a consequence. So that would be mine. And also, I think creating better links between middle career level industry representation and academia would help a lot, because I think sometimes people in academia have a very limited view of industry, and I think the innovation that's occurring there is very equally important. And I think sometimes in academia they're like, back in my day, and then you're like, it's not like that anymore.
Maybe a bit more of a lighter-hearted one now to break this up. What is the coolest thing you found in the soil when taking cores and stuff?
Okay. Possibly the most exciting to look at is fool's gold, which is pyrite, which actually looks like you found gold in the ground, which is pretty exciting. Lots of fossils, sadly no diamonds, oil, gold. I get that a lot from excavator drivers that are helping me dig the soil. They're like, oh, you're gonna make, I'm like, I wouldn't be sat here in the rain, in the snow, putting soil in a bag if I'd ever found gold or oil. But I think yeah, probably fossils and things like that are the most. I haven't found a body yet though, so here's to hoping maybe someday it's quite interesting, but no.
Is that a common thing? It's not a question that's been asked. That's more a personal.
I'm sure it probably has by someone. We dig enough holes that one day there's bound to be. I think one of my colleagues found a whole like Roman fire pit, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I've not found anything that exciting. Sadly, just cool. Soil, which I found exciting and most people don't. So.
Well, let's be fair soon. But I hope you find actual real gold soon. That might be nice.
Yeah, that would be great.
Fund your own EDI work.
That's it.
So what do you think we can do to change the perception of the engineering industry, specifically the view that it's a place for straight men?
Okay. I think just promotion, visible role models. So at the moment, I'm being involved in a podcast which goes out to industry. I'm also I've got a piece published in our industry magazine. So these are things that are read by a lot of straight white males, and their view when I speak on panel events and forums is that, oh, we don't have a problem. We've hired like a woman secretary, so it all must be fine. I'm not discriminatory. And until you raise their awareness and say, hey, but I'm experiencing this. This is what's happening. Look, we haven't got enough diversity. They're like, oh, maybe we haven't. Maybe we should do something about that. And then on the flip side, I think it's really important to get into schools and universities and show that there is that inclusivity and that they would be welcomed and they will be supported. It's not quite there yet, but the more we can put into demonstrating that they will have a successful career and career path, and that it's been possible for people like me, that the more people will join, hopefully, and then the more diverse it will be. I think it's like a iterative process that will just keep improving and improving, hopefully.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that excellent talk and answering all of our questions. There's still a few coming through, but I suppose they could just are you happy to answer any questions in the chat or on Twitter?
Fine. Yeah, no problem. I will do that in the chat.
Okay, sounds brilliant. Okay, well, thank you again.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
And so